we talk to Sonali about innovation, growth, and responsible AI. Let's dive into this episode to uncover her experience as a fractional leader, CTO, CPO, and advisor.
So the one truth about building responsible AI products that most founders overlook, in my view, is that responsible AI is not just a checklist or a compliance hurdle, the thing that you do right before launch. It actually is a continuous holistic mindset that must be embedded throughout the entire product life cycle, from problem framing all the way to post-deployment monitoring. It really, in my view, is about recognizing that humans are always in the loop, from the data that trains the model to the users impacted by its decisions, and of course, the teams that is maintaining it over time. So to give you a concrete example, a real world example from one of my projects, I work with a team implementing an AI solution for contact center. It's one of those highly highlighted and very popular applications of AI. And the goal there was to analyze customer agent conversations and provide performance feedbacks to the agents. So on the surface, it seemed like a straightforward AI application, use AI to evaluate calls, help agents improve. But had we simply trained the model on historical call data without careful oversight, the AI could have learned and perpetuated all the biases, perhaps favoring, certain communication styles, accents, because, we see all of these BPOs, back office centers, in certain geographies of the world, so they tend to be more biased. And that would have led to sort of unfair performance assessments and even discrimination for the agents. And so we ended up taking a very proactive approach. We made sure to audit the training data for representation and fairness. We augmented the existing training data with external data for bias compensation, detect any patterns of bias in AI's feedback, built transparency into the system, and then also gave the human in the loop, the agents themselves, control over the performance. So let me start with giving a background about Worth AI and what they do. So it's a fast-growing fintech that specializes in AI-powered risk management and underwriting for SMBs, particularly in the small to mid-size SMBs. I'm fortunate to be a technical advisor and fractional CTO at Worth. And one of Worth's key early and marquee products is an SMB score. So it's kind of like a FICO score for consumers. It's the equivalent of that for SMBs. And it's used by financial institutions for applications like credit underwriting, lending. So we run very sophisticated models to come up with this SMB score. Now, of course, because we are a fintech, we need to provide transparency in scoring for regulatory reasons. Plus, more importantly, the stakes are high because we want to ensure fairness to the SMBs themselves, because this data is used by the financial institutions to make capital lending decisions, underwriting, all of those things which are very crucial for the SMBs to succeed. Now at Worth, our challenge at hand was to be able to provide transparency or AI explainability for the Worth score. But at the same time, we had to sort of balance the tension of protecting our IP. So you want to be explainable so that the financial institutions can make the right decisions. We are fair to the SMBs, but protect our IP. And so what we came up with was a model we called signal bundles, where we are actually giving signals for why a score is what it is, with certain weights associated with it. So as an example, if you're a laundromat and let's say your Worth SMB score is like a 650, we would give sort of reasons for that score. It could be because the category you're in, consumer services, it could be because of your location, it could be financial reasons, different sort of reasons and rationale, which we surfaced as signals with weights. From speaking from a technology perspective, If you are a new technologist looking to bring in responsible AI and explainable AI, the good thing out there is good work done in terms of open source libraries and algorithms. The most common one that I'd encourage you to explore is SHAP, or Shapley Additive Explanations in short, which actually is a very well-built and a robust library for AI model explainability. There's also LIME, which is another popular technique that approximates complex models with simple, local, interpretable models. And I think as your models get more complex, like if you're in neural networks territory, it does become harder to sort of maintain the explainability. Plus, if you have sort of a multi-model scenario, if you have data that is getting transformed, features that are getting transformed, explainability does become harder to do, which is where, my earlier point about sort of weaving in from the very beginning sort of helps more with explainability throughout the process. So when advising CEOs, CTOs, data science team at AI ML centric startups, biggest blind spot, in my view, is that too many leaders silo their data ML teams, treating them like a back-end engineering center as opposed to a customer-facing innovator. And so what I've seen this leads to is that you may have, beautifully engineered data pipelines, meticulously tuned models, and perhaps a great data infra, which may completely miss the mark on solving real customer problems. So as an example, one of the startups that I work with, they spent a good 6 months tuning the precision recall of their models. They reached like 99% plus precision, which was great for the industry they were in. But when they got into customer pilots, the accuracy as measured by the customer fell short at like 60%. And so the challenge was that they had made certain assumptions in the way that the customers would query them and the output that was expected. And so that loss of customer centricity, what we call customer obsessed culture, actually led to this sort of situation. They spent a couple more months fixing the situation and getting back to accuracy. And so what we ended up doing in that case was sort of restructuring the teams, hiring a data ML leader that was not just a data ML leader, but actually also a customer leader embedded into the product, would sit on customer calls, would talk to like even the customer success team, the sales team. And then the whole data organization was sort of more elevated to be customer face innovators as opposed to just, pure data backend engineering teams. What we also did for them is that we revised our KPIs to align with the success and outcomes. And so that the outcomes were not just, what you see in classic data ML teams, precision, recall, accuracy, completeness. It was more around, in addition to those, actually customer-centric KPIs, whether it be, are we able to solve the customer problem? Are we able to solve it fast enough? Are we able to solve it with accuracy? So things of those nature, customer-centric KPIs with the data team sort of helped us elevate and bring data to be more customer-centric. So I've had the fortune to serving on multiple boards and also for some in an advisory capacity. And now I'm on the other side of the table where I'm rolling up my sleeves, digging in as a fractional CTO. And very often when we are brought in, it is because something is broken. When everything's hunky-dory, all's right, the management, the boards, the investors do not bring in external fractional folks, which makes sense. And so when I come in, there's already something that's broken that they are looking to urgently fix. So my approach in sort of getting in is first start from the top, take a 360 view, and then only delve deep. So I start with understanding the business, the customer need, the product, talking to sales, customer success, and then I delve real deep into the technology architecture, even into the code. But I feel like that 360-degree view of the situation helps me with sort of finding more meaningful solutions from a technology side that map to what the customer wants. And there's a higher degree of success when I sort of understand the big picture. So that's my approach in sort of when brought in to fix something that's broken. Start from the top, understand the business context, start from the high altitude, zoom out first, and then dive real deep in and then find what's broken. I don't believe there's a one size fits all. Every company is unique. I've been in situations where it is really like data, the technology. I've been in situations where there's a disconnect between the technology and the product and the sales and what the customer wants. But more often, I think it is a challenge of finding the right priorities and the focus. That's number one. And the second one I'd say is what I call being able to see the forest over the woods, which I feel is, if teams and leaders are able to anticipate what could go wrong, we most often would not be in the situation that we are in. So I'd say that is the other common thing that I see is not having that line of sight. Again, they're seeing the forest over the woods that has led to the mess that they're in. Yeah, so yoga is my daily happy pill. Well, at least most days it's my happy pill when I get to the mat. And I always say, when I get to the mat versus the Sonali that walks out the mat is a much happier, calmer Sonali. I say it's my antidepressant, my high energy Red Bull, it's my therapist, it's all in one. But more in sort of pressure situations, it has helped me in so many ways. Like I was a senior vice president at Square, and I remember walking into all hands, speaking in front of, thousands of people, ready to dodge all those questions that come my way. And I take my, 15 to 20 minutes of a breathing exercises, yoga pranayamas right before that all hands. And it would just center me. It would just bring so much calmness, and I'd be like, bring it on. So definitely a lot of high pressure situations, I believe yoga has helped me in so many ways, to the degree that I went and got in my yoga teacher training just because I wanted to understand the science for why, it was helping the way it was helping me. It is so amazing. It is so amazing. I remember being in situations, sometimes you don't get your full night's sleeps because, you're sort of either stressed or there's a lot of work going on. And there's certain yoga techniques, like, I don't know if you've heard of this thing called yoga nidra. And so it's kind of like a 30-minute sleep thing. But, you do yoga nidra for, 30 minutes, and it's actually equivalent to like 3 hours of deep sound sleep. So, it's definitely my go-to when I'm like on a business travel or when I haven't had my full night of sleep. Yeah, so I went fractional because, honestly, I'm now the master of my own time. I'm the master of where I spend my energy, as well as I'm the master of which problems I want to solve, while at the same time, I keep myself challenged and learn continuously. Like, I feel like it can get better than this. And so that is the number one reason I went fractional. And it's surprising, it's fascinating that even though every project is new, every company is different, there are so many shared patterns and frameworks that I tend to learn and apply across all. So I feel like it's accelerated learning when you're in this fractional roles engaging with different companies all at the same time. The benefits of going fractional are, again, the autonomy of time, the expedited learning, applying shared frameworks across different startups. But it does come with its own challenges. What I feel is when you're doing fractional, you're sort of coming in for a particular project or an assignment, you complete that assignment successfully, and then you move on to your next one. And so essentially, in some ways, you're sort of in a constant sales mode. where you're sort of finding the next good opportunity where there's mutual value add for you as well as the company. So I guess the challenge, if any, would be that you're sort of in this constant sales mode. So that's one. The second is like managing scope creep. There is a lot of times expectation mismatch in terms of what you bring to the table, the amount of time you estimate something might take versus what the company might estimate it might take. And so that results in scope creep. You end up working 5 days instead of 2 days of work that you thought you would. And so it's been a learning experience in terms of laying the boundaries of the scope of work and setting those expectations so that there's mutual value add, mutual respect, as well as every side is fairly compensated for the work that they're doing. So one of the most important lessons I've learned as a fractional leader shaping the futures of multiple companies is that lasting momentum comes from building internal ownership, not just delivering quick wins or expert advice. So fractional work is unique in the way that we come in because something is broken, because a particular problem or sometimes many need to get fixed. And so it's tempting to focus on, high velocity execution, like headline results, but real sustained momentum for that company happens when you embed your expertise into the organization's DNA and empower the team to carry that torch long after you're gone. So to me, it means, you're co-creating the solution and not just directing it. And so involving the internal teams in the decision making and even in the why behind the solution is sort of ways that you sort of do it together with them. And equally important is to build champions, because most often the company got into a particular state that they did where something was broken because there were things that had to be done differently in terms of either the culture, the process, of course the tech, and sometimes even the team. And so building champions and evangelists within the company so that they are able to champion for this going ahead, and so that the company never has to get into the same state again, is ways I feel like one could. There was this one particular case where there was a company, actually a 10 to 12-year-old risk management company, which had actually very dated technology. And the reason they were in that state was because the technology leadership weren't the strongest advocates of investing in technology. And hence they ended up doing a lot of stuff manually as opposed to doing it automated or augmented with technology. And so in that gig, it was a lot about coaching the existing technology leaders to be the voice of the technology, advocate for those technology items, work with product and the CEO to make sure they got time into the roadmap, that they got energy, they got resources, that they got dollars for these projects. And so it was a lot of coaching of the existing team, in addition to, of course, doing the work that needed to be done, those early wins. And so by way of that coaching and building the champions, that then was the lasting momentum, because now that organization, the CTO, is often the guy who raises the hands and sort of pushes for those projects. That'll make sure that there's enough technology-led work as opposed to sort of manual, cumbersome type of work that used to happen operationally in that startup. And it's actually also about saying no, not just for the manual work, but actually also for buying time. Because to do it right with engineering, it will take the right time, the right infra, the right technology, things that will be foundation for the company. So it's actually also saying that it may take 3 months as opposed to a month, but this will be more lasting for the company and could become differentiated IP for the company in the long run. When we join as fractionals, most often there is a lot of chaos involved, and there is a tendency to sort of do those quick fixes, get those early wins. At the same time, the entire team, the culture is new as a fractional leader for us. And so to me, the most key thing is to build relationships. Investing in relationships, obviously with the technology org, but also with your partners and peers outside of the technology org, so that when you propose those radical changes, ask for budget, ask for team changes, new hiring that needs to be done, there's more trust into the changes that you're trying to make and the impact that you're trying to create. At the same time, when we deliver early value, I feel like it's very important to share credit because, our goal as fractional leaders is to augment the existing team and not to walk over them. And so sharing credit, being thankful and acknowledging of the internal teams and how they have helped you as well as the organization, I feel like just establishes more inner trust. And I feel like the organization then is more open to radical changes that you may propose for lasting impact in the company. And then last but not the least, this is the obvious one. It's like you got to listen first and act second. They say we got 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, which is essentially, there's a lot more to be learned from listening to people. Because most often the organization and the team has so much more context about the problems. So just listening in, speaking with so many people is a way of sort of uncovering what could be wrong. And understanding all of that context helps with the solutioning that comes afterwards. So I've been in full-time engineering roles for a lot of time. I've done head of engineering, CTO. Most recently, I was a senior vice president at Square. And so I feel like as full-time leaders, there is so much of that mindset of fractional that gets embodied and should be embodied. Now, particularly in fractionals, I feel like it's super important to have a power of focus, to have objectivity as well as adaptability. We come in as fractionals, very often once you open the hood, you're going to find a can of worms. There's a lot of problems one could chase, but just finding those key ones. And so bringing in power of focus for the problems that matter the most and deliver the most value. I feel like that's true today as it has been before, but all the more true today because today's leaders are all sort of in this do more with less type of mode where a lot of challenges and organizations and then urgency around solving those problems fast. And so that power of focus, I believe, is super important in full-time leaders. At the same time, one of the differences in fractional versus full-time is that we don't have as much of baggage of relationships when we come in as fractional. So we tend to be more objective and problem and solution focused. And I feel like, staying out of those long-standing dynamics and then providing unbiased feedback and making impartial decisions is something that would have surely helped me in my full-time role. And I feel like it's something that will help all full-time leaders. Now, obviously, last but not the least, as fractional leaders, we tend to be very adaptable. We sort of have to learn it on the fly because we engage with different startups, different companies, different products, different team cultures. And so naturally, your survival depends on your adaptability. And so as full-time leaders, there's always different personalities that you work with. And that adaptability is just, shared leadership trait that it's going to benefit every leader in all organizations. You get right to the heart of the problem and not worry about, the politics or the people dynamics, because your job as a fractional leader is to find the right problems and solve the right problems and just create them. Honestly, I feel like working as a fractional leader hasn't fundamentally changed how I view leadership. However, being a strategic advisor and a board member has. The reason is that when you are a strategic advisor, you're sort of forced to zoom out and see the business context first, the customer context first, before you sort of dive deep and look into the problems themselves, no matter what functional area, technology, product, finance, marketing, whatever it is. And so to me, what that has done or evolved my leadership style is elevated from being a technology leader to what I say a business focused technology leader. So I feel like my biggest growth in leadership has come from being on the other side of the table as a strategic advisor, because it has helped me zoom out. It has helped me connect with the business context. And then once you have that, it just sets you in a position to deliver more customer-centric, business-focused value as a technology leader. You develop so much more empathy for different functions that were sort of not your core strength, right? And I feel like this sort of, being on the other side of the table, for lack of a better word, as a strategic advisor, has definitely grown me in terms of having more empathy for different functions. And at the end of the day, makes me a better technology leader, better position to deliver impact. I mean, as a fractional leader, we are brought in to sort of as firefighters, right? So there is a fire out there somewhere that obviously needs to be put out at urgency, and that is urgent. At the same time, as we discussed earlier, you want to make sure that you're making long-term sustainable decisions. So I feel like finding those low-hanging fruit, if you may, that will douse the fire is super critical. At the same time, identifying the longer term strategic items, which often need more time, investment, energy, resources, is critical. So I almost use, the urgent deliverables as a way of identifying what those long-term systemic issues or technology architecture or people changes or process changes that need to be made, and use that near-term deliverable to identify the long-term strategic projects that the company needs, and then advocate for that long-term strategic change, whether it's people, process, product, technology. And then I feel like with those identified and having gotten buy-in from the leaders, that's what sets the company on sort of a long-term path of momentum, as well as just sort of turns the page in the turns the page in the company for the longer term, if you may.